code system and is the CEO of Discover Healing, a holistic education platform that provides training and certifies practitioners worldwide. And he also has a new book coming out this month in February. So it will already be out by the time this podcast gets released, and it is called The Body Code. And today we are going to talk about how our emotions are connected to our physical and mental well-being. This is just such a great topic and one that really hits home to me. I love it. So with that, welcome, Dr. Nelson.
Well, thank you, Sandy, for having me on. It's really great to be here.
I'm excited. I'm excited for this talk, but you got to tell me, how did you get into this?
Well, I had some really interesting experiences as a child. I had an instantaneous healing that happened to me when I was 7 years old. I was really sick with the measles, and my father was praying for me, and I was instantly healed. That was kind of the first thing that happened to me. Then I was 13 years old. I had kidney disease. Some holistic doctors helped me to get over that very rapidly when Western medicine had nothing to offer. And then it was actually a prayer thing. I was trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with my life, and I'd always wanted to go into the healing arts and to be a chiropractor specifically. And I kind of got sidetracked and discovered computers and became a computer programmer and was kind of going that direction. And it was a really powerful answer to prayer that brought me back to that path. And so when I got into practice as a chiropractor, I had this habit that I developed early on where I would try to ask for help and try to be open to intuition about what was wrong with people. And in fact, I had this private personal habit that I never told anybody about ever for all the years that I was in practice, for roughly a couple of decades. Before I would work on somebody, I would just take a moment and I would just ask for help. And we all believe different things, and that's fine. But I believe that God is literally our Father, that we're really His children. And so I would ask for help in just a silent, private way. And it only took a moment. But during all those years, Sandy, there were times when, in response to that asking, I would receive, and information would flood into me sometimes. That didn't happen very often, but it did happen sometimes. And that taught me that higher power is really aware of us and what we're doing all the time. And we can ask for help and we can get it. So one of the biggest things that I learned, and really the most pivotal understanding behind all the work that we teach, is that within each one of us is a subconscious mind that is essentially unlimited, that is keeping track of everything that's going on in our bodies, that is creating millions of new cells every minute, that is digesting our food and is creating all kinds of chemical reactions in the body. I mean, countless activities that are going on at the cellular and at the quantum level that we have no awareness of at all consciously. And so the conscious mind is kind of like the passenger that's along for the ride in an extremely sophisticated machine that is the body. And the body consists of not only this physical body that we have, but also there's a spirit body within us. And that, I think, is really the intelligence that lies within us. That's really who we are. When we die, that part of us goes on and the body eventually turns back to dust, right?
Yeah.
So during those years, what I learned was that all of my patients, no matter how young or old they were, all had something in common. No matter what they were suffering from, whether it was depression or anxiety or phobias or panic attacks or PTSD. And you can tell right away that I was kind of an unusual chiropractor because I did have people coming in for physical pain, but I also ended up being able to work with all kinds of other issues. People would come to see me with different diseases that they'd been told there was no hope for in Western medicine. And what I found was that I could tap in and talk to the subconscious mind. And that isn't something that I created. It's been around for a long, long time. It's simply through what we call muscle testing, right? Or there are different names for it, but muscle testing is the simplest name. It's a form of biofeedback. What I found was that I could ask questions and direct those questions towards my patient. And those questions would be answered by their subconscious mind when they had no conscious idea of what was really going on. And it got to a point that I can remember sometimes telling, I remember at least on one occasion, I had a new patient that came in that had some major things going on. And I said, well, I'm basically clueless about what's wrong with you. And they kind of looked at me and I said, but it's okay. Your subconscious mind, that computer within you, knows exactly what's wrong with you. And I know how to talk to it. So fear not, we're going to figure this out. And so during the last 10 years that I was in practice, most of the people that I saw had been told there was no hope for them at all, that Western medicine had nothing to offer these people, that they were never going to get well, is what they were told. And yet the vast majority of those people were able to get well. And the thing that I found with all of these people, no matter how young or old they were, no matter what they were suffering from, was that they all had emotional baggage, and that emotional baggage was a major component of their physical or mental or emotional problem. Mm. And it's a really fascinating thing. But these bodies are so much more intelligent than we think, and so much more intricate, and really so much more sacred, and so much more incredible than we give them credit for. And the subconscious mind of each person is tied into the database, I believe, of universal intelligence. And so the subconscious mind knows what's going on. To give you an idea how this can work, one of the stories in the body code book is about a young woman that came in to see me. She was in her early 20s, and she had this severe pain in the abdomen. And she'd been hospitalized for this pain for 5 days while they tried to figure out what was causing this pain. And they couldn't figure it out. And they ran all the tests, and all the tests were negative. So they just let her go from the hospital, and just, they told her, well, we can't really help you. We think it's all in your head, kind of. So
yeah,
goodbye.
Heard that before.
Yeah, right. That's what they told her. So she came into my office, and I did a session with her. I worked with her, and using what we now call the body code, which is just simply a way. It's simply kind of like a roadmap to be able to ask questions and get answers about what's really going on inside. And I found some things and fixed some things, and cleared some trapped emotions and things. And one of the things that I found was she had a need for chromium. And in the body code, we have tables of nutrients and herbs and essential oils and all kinds of things that you can ask the subconscious mind what it needs, and it will tell you, which is really the ultimate way to work on the body, I think. And I found that she needed chromium. And I thought it was an incidental finding. I said, okay, well, you need chromium. I don't have any. I think you probably should get some because your subconscious is telling me that that's what you need. I'm doing all this through muscle testing on her and getting answers, right? She's holding her arm out. I'm asking questions, and her arm is staying strong for yes answers, and it's going weak for no answers. And so that was all I could find on her. And so she went home. She was still in pain. The next day she came back in. She was my very first patient the next morning, and she was actually getting worse. And I remember thinking, they must have missed something in the hospital. I don't know how they could have. She was there for 5 days. They did every test they had, but this is not good. She was like an 11 on a 0 to 10 scale. She was really in pain. And so I didn't know what else to do. So I started asking her subconscious mind, okay, what is going on here? And using the body code, or at least the version of it that I had at the time, Out of all the thousands of possibilities that I could have been taken to, her subconscious mind took me to nutrition. And there's a table there of all kinds of nutrients. And it's got a couple of columns and about 6 or 7 rows. And so I was taken to a column and a row, and I started naming these nutrients. And when I got to chromium, her arm suddenly went strong. And then I remembered, oh, yeah, that showed up yesterday. I didn't think it was a big deal. But I said, I don't know why, but I said, I think you really need chromium. And so I want you to leave my office right now, go down the street to the health food store, buy some chromium, just get some tablets, ask for water, and don't wait. Just open the bottle and take a few right there. 20 minutes later, this very athletic young woman is jumping up and down in my waiting room, literally. And she's saying, I'm fixed. I'm fixed. She said the instant that she took the chromium tablets, that pain that she'd had for about 8 days at that point was completely gone, just instantaneously gone. And she said, how did that work? And I said, I have no idea. I still have no idea. Nobody's been able to explain it to me. But think about this. I told her, I said, look, luckily, we were able to get the information from your subconscious mind about what you really needed, what was really causing this pain for you. And that's the beauty of this. How it worked exactly, what the mechanism was, I don't know. But you're out of pain, and that's what we were looking for. That's what we were after. So now, if you think about your own body, is there something that maybe you're missing, something you're deficient in? Could be, right? I mean, think about it. What do? We go to the health food store, those of us that go to health food stores, and we kind of stroll up and down the aisles, and we're looking at all these supplements. And, well, I've heard that one's good. This has a shiny wrapper. I like that one. I'll take that. But your subconscious mind at that point might be saying, oh, no, you don't need that one. You need the one over there. Mm-hmm. Well, how do you know that? Well, if you're really, really intuitive and you're really tuned in, then you might know exactly what you're supposed to take. Sandy, have you ever had a situation where you kind of had a feeling about something, and there was like something that you knew you needed, for example, and then you found out at some later point, oh, actually, you do need this? You ever had that happen?
I'm listening to everything that you're saying, and I can't tell you how much I align with it. Because yes, and also because I have actually had, my kids used to think I was like out there, mom. This is before I became a practitioner, because I learned about muscle testing. But I know what you do goes way deeper with the charts and the analysis of the emotions. But I used to test my kids for their probiotics. I'd be like, okay, come here. Let's see if you're strong for this probiotic or not. And because I was in school, I went back to college back then. And I'd be like, so I was learning about probiotics and I'm like, but sometimes my kids would be like, their bodies were clearly telling me that they don't need that strain of probiotic. So then I try another one, and then they'd be strong for it. I'm like, okay, today you can take this one. Yeah. So everything that you're saying, I love it, because I have witnessed it. I have tested with it. But what you're doing goes way deeper than this, way deeper.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, from the big picture point of view, if you could imagine looking at the Earth from out in space and comprehending what's going on, every single person walking around has a supercomputer inside of them that knows exactly what's wrong with them, that has a list of things that need to be fixed, supplements that need to be taken, imbalances that are going on that need to be corrected, so that they can really function and be totally healthy. Yeah. But nobody's aware of that, or very, very few. And so what happens is people end up with symptoms. The symptoms get worse and worse and worse. Eventually they go to the doctor, and maybe they remove an organ. Yes. Or maybe they have some other kind of operation, or maybe they're given some kind of a toxic petrochemical pharmaceutical drug that slowly poisons their liver and their kidneys. their hair falls out, their quality of life goes to hell, and then they die an early death.
Mhm.
And that's what's going on in the world largely. But the reality of it is, again, if you could look at the world from space and comprehend what's going on, every single person walking around has this sacred intelligence within them that is really, truly who they are,
Yeah.
that understands with a perfect understanding what's really going on and what they really need.
Yeah.
And so, what the body code is about is it's just simply a way to help the average person without any kind of education about biology or physics or nutrition or anything at all like that. It enables the average person to unlock that body's innate ability to heal by finding the imbalances that are going on. The number one kind of imbalance that people suffer from actually is emotional baggage.
Yes.
And to understand what emotional baggage is, you have to understand that um, the body itself, even though it seems really solid, right? I mean, you can slap your hands together, they make a nice sound. These bodies seem solid, but there's another view of it. I mean, quantum physicists say that if you could remove all the empty space in your body, and if you could do that to all the space in between all the atoms in the body, you could actually fit every single person on Earth into a box the size of a sugar cube. Think about that.
Wow.
So these bodies of ours, this reality that we're living in is so fascinating because to us, it seems so three-dimensional and so solid. But the reality of it is our bodies are just energy fields, and our bodies are more of a projection than anything else. It's hard to wrap your mind around that. But if you talk to anybody who understands quantum physics, they'll tell you, yeah, that's exactly how our reality really is. That's the real reality. Well, so what happens to us when we're feeling a certain emotion is that if the emotion is powerful enough, sometimes that emotion is not processed well by the body. And so that energy can become trapped in the body. So if you think about it, we experience emotions all the time, every day, right? And those emotions, those feelings that we have are messages from the deep subconscious. And most of the time, what happens is when you start to feel an emotion, there's a little loop that you go through. You start to feel that emotion. You start to feel maybe the physical sensations that go with that, the thoughts that go along with that. You acknowledge that emotion, and then you allow that emotion to recede into the distance. And that little loop of that emotional experience is closed and done, and you move on with your life. But sometimes we can trap emotional energies. And here's how it works. Let's imagine, for example, that you learn as a child that maybe your dad was a rageaholic, for example, and you learn that that emotion of anger is really a bad emotion. You should never allow yourself to feel it. Well, let's say that something happens to you, someone wrongs you in some way, and you start to feel this emotion of anger, which is probably justified. And so you start to feel that emotion. And rather than acknowledging it and allowing it to get processed normally and in a natural way, you decide you're not going to go there. You're not going to allow yourself to even feel that emotion. So you bury it. So
Right.
then what happens is that little loop of that emotional process gets stuck. So now you have an open loop for that emotion. And the energy of that emotion that was trying to be expressed now is kind of in suspended animation in the body. And we call that a trapped emotion. Literally, it's an emotional energy because everything is energy. Our bodies, the earth, the moon, the sun, the stars, everything is all just energy. Thought is energy. Emotional feelings are energy. So we call it a trapped emotion, and they're usually about the size of a baseball to the size of a softball. And these can lodge anywhere in the body, and wherever they lodge, they will tend to distort the normal energy field of the body, and they can create symptoms from that. Because when you have a trapped emotion in a certain area, whatever area that might be, and they can lodge anywhere, that emotional energy is a distorting force that can interfere with the chemical reactions taking place in that area. can interfere with blood flow, lymph flow to some degree, and can interfere with the natural flow of acupuncture meridian energy in that area. So these can be ultimately very damaging. So that's one way that we trap these. Another way that we trap these emotions is, let's say that something happens and you start to feel a certain emotion. Maybe it's resentment or a feeling of maybe depression or anxiety. Normally, you would allow that emotional energy to be felt without enhancing it or anything. You just allow it to be felt and acknowledged, and then it would dissipate and disappear into the distance. And then that loop is closed and that emotional experience is over. But let's say that something happens and you decide you're going to get really upset. Let's say you feel resentment about something that someone does. And you decide consciously, yes, I feel resentful and I should feel resentful. And by golly, I'm really upset about this. Then what happens is that emotional energy, instead of allowing it to be acknowledged and dissipate, it becomes trapped in this accentuated feeling of that emotion. And so then what happens is you have an open loop for that emotional experience, and that energy is in suspended animation in your body, a little ball of energy. And so depending on wherever that lodges in the body, you might eventually have symptoms from that. And so, and symptoms can include all kinds of things. When I was in practice, a woman came in to see me once who was about 72 years old, and it was her very first visit. And the very first thing that showed up on her as I'm talking to her subconscious mind and getting answers from her subconscious, strong for yes, weak for no, the first thing that showed up was she had a trapped emotion of sadness, and I needed to know more. The subconscious mind. That's a question we actually ask. Do we need to know more about this? And her subconscious said yes. So I started asking when this had occurred, and it had happened 10, 20, 30, it was like 40 years before, in 1960. And actually, I narrowed it down to 1963. 1963. And I thought, well, I've seen this before on people where they had a trapped emotion about JFK's assassination, right?
Wow.
And so I said out loud, I said, okay, is this about JFK's assassination? And the answer came back from her subconscious mind, yes. And at that moment, she burst into tears. And she said, oh, yes, that affected me so much. And she said, when JFK's son, JFK Jr., died in the plane crash, she said, it was like it all came back all over again. And all I could do was cry for days. I couldn't work or do anything. And I thought, well, a trapped emotion can make you feel an accentuated response, right? To an emotion. And so I thought to myself, I wonder where this energy, this ball of emotional energy, this sadness about a JFK dying, where is this in her body? Where has this been for all these years, and what's it done to her? And so I started asking, well, is this on the right side of your body somewhere? And the answer was no. Is it on the left side of the body? Yes. Okay. Is it in the abdomen? No. Is it in the chest area? Yes. And it turned out that emotional energy had become trapped in the left breast. Now, at that point, all of a sudden, we both kind of looked at each other like a couple of owls with these big eyes, because we suddenly realized that breast wasn't even there anymore. It had been removed 4 years before because it was malignant, right?
Oh, wow.
And so if you think about these emotional energies, what they do, I think that was a case where it's very likely that was the underlying cause of that cancer, you see. And what we know is that emotional energies will lodge in certain places in the body. Sometimes there are symbolic reasons. Sometimes there are metaphysical reasons. Sometimes trapped emotions will lodge in an area because maybe there was some kind of pre-existing, maybe an injury there or a weakness of some kind. But we know that in relationships, for example, especially with women, trapped emotions that are developed because a relationship maybe is going awry or having some kind of a problem, or you're going through a divorce or whatever, those energies will often lodge in the sexual organs, especially the breasts. And so it's one of the reasons why white women especially end up with breast cancer. It's much more rare in men, but it can happen. And so think about it this way. Okay. In this, again, looking at the world from space and seeing how people take care of themselves. Here's a woman, for example, now who ends up with breast cancer. 10 years ago, she went through a divorce and she was in an abusive relationship, maybe, and so on. And now she's diagnosed with cancer. She found this lump. And so she goes to the medical profession and they want to slice off the breast, right?
Yeah.
They want to give her radiation, which of course is very damaging, and or treat her with these really toxic chemicals that if she survives it, and by the way, my own personal opinion is more people die from chemo than die from cancer, is what I think. But that's what's going on. And again, looking at the world, looking at the earth from space and realizing that there is maybe a better way, that the subconscious mind of that woman knows exactly why that's actually, that symptom is manifesting for her. See?
Yes.
And so the bottom line is that, there's always going to be a need for Western medicine, and Western medicine is fantastic. It's so many things, right? But most of the things that Western medicine is good at are actually kind of sudden acute problems. Western medicine isn't really that good at problems that are chronic. Western medicine is not very good yet at understanding the deep underlying reasons why people have symptoms, because it happens all the time. People go to the doctor and their symptoms are just, they might be given a diagnosis. They might say, well, you have fibromyalgia, which means you have pain in the muscles. Well, they went to the doctor because they had muscle pain, right? Yeah. So the doctor's saying, oh, you have muscle pain. It's called this. They knew that already. And they're told by the way, this is hopeless. There's nothing you can do for this.
And here's the medication for it. And you're dealing with all the symptoms.
Exactly. Right. In fact, it reminds me of a story. I spoke once at a fibromyalgia support group. Now, fibromyalgia is this situation where you get pain in the muscles. It can be all over the body, and it's a miserable thing. And medically, there's no known reason for it, and no known cure, no known cause. And I spoke at a hospital fibromyalgia support group once years ago. I spoke for about an hour. There were about 50 people in this group. And there was a woman sitting in the audience that I noticed that cried the whole way through my presentation. And she just had tears coming down. And when the meeting was over, people were gathering around trying to talk to me. And this woman was there. And I was having a hard time understanding her because she was, she was quite upset. And she said that for 19 years, she'd had fibromyalgia. And that she'd seen about 9 different doctors for it during all those years. And she said she cried every day because the pain was so bad. But she said the reason she was crying that night was because it was the first time in her existence or in the course of her disease, that she'd ever heard a doctor say there might be a way for you to get over this, that you might actually have some hope of getting well. And she'd been living this hellish existence for all those years. Well, she came into my office, and what I found going on with her was not unusual for people who end up with some kind of a major disease process. You see, there are 6 different areas in which we can lose our health, 6 different kinds of imbalances. Now, one of those is what we call energetic imbalances. And those are things like trapped emotions and traumas, trauma energies that happen to the body.
Can I ask you a question about the trapped emotions? Because, you mentioned an emotion that doesn't go through the full cycle where it's, felt and then released. I guess the same thing would be repeated emotions, right? Like if you're always resentful, like, do you understand what I mean? I see there's differences, right? There's people who are always living in the past, for example, and talking about something that happened to them. And it's like, that's the trauma, right?
Well, what trapped emotions tend to do is they tend to anchor you to that experience. That energy is kind of fastening you to whatever happened. And so, for example, let's say that you go through a breakup and you're really deeply grieved. Well, now that grief is part of you. And so now, anytime you think about going to a new relationship, that grief comes along with it. And
Mm-hmm.
so it becomes much harder for you to have a new relationship. And also, what's really interesting is that that energy that you have trapped in your body is vibrating out its frequency into the universe. And so, in this very strange quantum physics kind of way, you will tend to attract people to you that will be on that kind of frequency that will tend to create experiences for you that will tend to recreate that trapped energy, that emotion. It's really interesting.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I had to ask that about
Yeah.
because there's, people, I want them to understand that it's not just like, oh, am I feeling anger? Okay, I released it. There's a lot more to it, right?
Right. Well, to give you an idea, that particular category in the body code, there's one category that has a bunch of different kinds of imbalances in it, but the most common, the most common kind of imbalance in that particular category of energies is trapped emotions.
Yeah.
And to give you an idea how this can work, there was a man that came in to see me many years ago, and he had really severe low back pain. And it'd been going on for, I think, about 3 weeks or a month. And I tested him and found immediately that he had a trapped emotion of anger. And
Mm.
his subconscious mind told me through testing, and by the way, anybody can do this. There's nothing magical about me doing it. It's all actually in the emotion code book. You can learn the whole thing in the book.
Yes.
It's all in there. And so what I found was this trapped emotion had occurred about 20 years before, and he immediately knew what it was. And he remembered this situation at work. He was very angry, and that energy was just a little too much for him to process. And so now that open loop, that emotional energy, decided to land in his low back. And so now, 20 years later, he's really in severe pain. He's
Mhm.
about a 9 on a 0 to 10 scale. And he's contemplating going and having some kind of surgery for this. He doesn't know what to do, but he comes to me as kind of a last resort. So I find he has this emotion of anger, and he remembers what it is. So I release the emotion of anger, and the pain level in his back goes from a 9 to a 0 instantly. I
Wow.
mean, gone, right? And he can't believe it. I mean, it's miraculous, and it seems miraculous to him anyway. I was glad that it worked. And he's bending over and twisting and walking around and exclaiming, and he just can't believe it. Well, he left the office a little bit later with no pain, and a couple of days later, he came back into the office again, and he still had no pain. And he said to me, he said, "Dr. Nelson, I still can't believe it. My back pain is just totally gone." But he said, he said, "When I came in here, I had another problem that I didn't tell you about." He said, "For as long as I can remember, I've basically been what you'd call a rageaholic."
Mm.
And he said, "I'm always yelling at my wife and my kids that we don't get along. And, I've got to watch the road rage. And I've been to anger management several times, hasn't really helped me." But he said, "Since you released that trapped emotion of anger from me, I feel totally different." He said, "Things that used to just set me off now don't set me off.
Mm.
And I just feel like I'm kind of coasting." And what did he say? He said he said, "I feel like kind of like a new person, and I don't understand how this works. What did you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm not really sure." But at the time, I was trying to figure this out, right? But think about it this way. This guy, 20 years before, develops a trapped emotion of anger. He's really angry. So that ball of energy, that ball of anger, lodges in his low back. Well, 20 years later, those tissues have been being distorted for so long that now finally he's really in pain, severe pain. He comes to see me, and I find it's a trapped emotion of anger. I identify it, I release it, and suddenly that distorting energy there, that anger is gone. With it goes the pain. What else goes with it? Well, think about it this way. In all those years, when a situation would come along in his life where he might tend to feel the emotion of anger, he would feel it. He would slide right into that vibration, if you will, uh, much more easily much more readily than he otherwise would have. Why? Because he's got this ball of anger literally in his low back, right? So part of his being was vibrating at the emotional frequency of anger 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, when we release that, suddenly, wow, he feels totally different. Now, think about your own life. What have you been through? Were you bullied as a child? Did your parents argue when you were a kid? Maybe they went through a divorce. Maybe you've been divorced. Maybe you've been bullied. Maybe you've been abused, maybe sexually or physically or verbally or whatever. Maybe you've had difficult work situations, or maybe your kids are a trial, or I mean, who knows? We all go through these difficult things. But what's fascinating is that our physical bodies will manifest the result of that emotional baggage. And pain is one of the most common things we see. That's the most common way. 90% of all the physical pain that people have is actually due to their emotional baggage. And that's what's driving this phenomenal success of this work all over the world. I mean, we've certified over 10,000 people now who do this method for a living, and it's energy medicine. So, I mean, they work with other people in other countries that they'll never probably ever meet, but yet whose lives they very likely have changed. And so, so this work is coming into the world at a time when the world just desperately needs it, because mankind has been enslaved really in many ways, and in some ways that we're just now beginning to understand. There have been power structures that have kept mankind in the dark and kept mankind from understanding who we really are, what our true nature is, what we're truly capable of, how incredibly intelligent these subconscious minds of ours are. And we're now starting to awaken. And that awakening, I think, right, we were talking about that earlier. It's going on all over the world. And people are starting to wake up and understand what's really going on with life. And so it's so fascinating, because you see in this age we're living in, you see these power structures that have never been questioned. They've never been opposed. And now all of a sudden they're desperate to hang on to their power. And yet at the same time, people are waking up one by one. It's like popcorn popping,
Yeah.
all these little minds that are popping
Yeah.
open all over the world. It's almost like you can hear it.
So, okay. So trapped emotions is one thing that this method works with. And then you said there were 6, right? 6?
There are 6 different kinds of imbalances, right?
Okay.
And you see, to help you understand how this came about, I used to be a computer programmer, and I did that for a number of years. And then I went into the healing arts, became a chiropractor. I started working with my patients, and I was always trying to categorize the things that I was finding. If I found something new on somebody, because remember, I'm trying to talk to their subconscious mind and get answers about what's really wrong with them, why they're having symptoms. And so I created a mind mapping system that enabled me when I'm working on a new patient and I find something new, I could look at my chart and put it into a certain place and into a certain category. And eventually I found that there were really 6 different categories of imbalances that we suffer from that cause all of our mental and emotional and physical problems. And so, so we talked about one of the categories has to do with emotional baggage and things like trauma energies that happen to the body. Another category is pathogens. The lady that I was telling you about that I met at that fibromyalgia support group meeting, she came in to see me, and I started testing to see what was going on with her. Now I'm just muscle testing, asking questions and getting answers. I found that she had a number of different pathogens living in her body. Okay.
Wow.
She had some kind of a parasite in the body. She had a number of different viral infections going on in the body. And so there are natural things that you can do to deal with that. So we started dealing with that. We found that she had a lot of nutritional deficiencies. Now, this is her subconscious mind telling me this through muscle testing and asking questions. In fact, I remember I had to reprogram my computer because she had more nutritional deficiencies than anybody I'd ever seen. And so I had to add some lines and things for more things
Wow.
for her. Um, so she had a number of different kind of misalignments in the body. Misalignments are generally caused by emotional baggage most of the time. Misalignments of bones and things like that. And that, of course, as a chiropractor, that was kind of what I had started out doing, was just
Right.
realigning things. But then things kept expanding and becoming more complex and yet actually simpler, which might sound weird, but it's true. One of the other areas that she had a lot of imbalances in was she was quite toxic, and different kinds of toxins in the body. And pretty much in the world now, everybody's toxic to one degree or another. And you've got to remove those toxins to really be totally healthy. Another area where she had trouble was in the circuitry and the systems of her body. I tested all the acupuncture meridians. Most of them were imbalanced. The chakras in the body, most of them were imbalanced. Most of the organs and the glands were also imbalanced. And so I started working with her and trying to address these various different categories and these imbalances that were going on, the pathogens, the nutritional issues, um, the uh, um, the structural imbalances, the toxicity, the trapped emotions, and the circuitry in the body that was imbalanced, the chakras and meridians, and so on. So I'm starting to work on all these things and doing the best I can to fix all these things. In 3 weeks, for the first time in almost 2 decades, she was completely out of pain. And that might sound impossible, but again, if you understand that the subconscious mind within each one of us, that part of you that knows how to create millions of new red blood cells every minute, for example, and do all the things that it does, that computer is accessible now. And so we can ask questions. And this is a game changer. Believe me, this is going to change the world, because every single person has the ultimate source within themselves. And if we ask questions, it will gladly give us the answers. I remember that woman still did have some pain. I think it was in her left thumb because she had some arthritis there, but the rest of it was all gone. And I'm just telling you, that really happened. And of course, that story was repeated many, many times in my office during the last 10 years that I was in practice. Most of the people that I saw had been told there was really no hope for them at all in Western medicine because there was no drug or surgery that would cure their problem. Well,
Right.
sometimes you might need a drug, or sometimes you might need a surgery.
Sure.
Most of the time, that's not really what we need. So that's the body code. And that's the book that I've written that's coming out. That's, I guess, out now. And it's available wherever books are sold.
Okay. So I have my questions now,
Okay.
because I do believe that, like, I'm a big believer in your work. I had thyroid cancer when I was 41. And I do believe that now at 53, I am speaking my truth. I
Yeah.
am living my best life, right? Like,
Right.
I'm doing
Mhm.
what I'm meant to be doing.
Sure.
And I
I
grew up in
get
a
that.
yeah, I grew up in a very, very loving family, but very strict Eastern European family, like where things were, kept tight and you had to respect. And it's just how I grew up. You weren't allowed to say no to your parents. So I see all of what you're saying, but now it's the past, right? It happened like 12 years ago. So I have to ask you, because we need to describe muscle testing,
Mhm.
because there's many different ways that you can muscle test. Like there's the sway method, and
Right.
maybe just give a quick rundown of what it actually is, because it's kind of like kinesiology, isn't it? A little bit.
Well, muscle testing is a form of kinesiology. There's a method in chiropractic called applied kinesiology, which is where you
Yeah.
test very specific muscle groups and so on. Um, this work is a little different because it's just stripped down to its essentials. It's very, very simple. And so, for example, if I were there with you, and you can demonstrate this, you can do this with your friends, do this with
Yes.
your kids. It's really simple. Here's one way that you can get an experience about this. if I were there with you, Sandy, if you were to hold your arm out parallel to the floor, okay, and if
Do
I
you
were to
want me to do
press,
this? Do you want
no,
me to do
no,
this
because
or?
I'm not there with you,
Oh, but
but
there's
if I,
virtual ways too, right?
it can be done virtually too. Yeah, and I'll show you that in a minute.
Okay, okay.
But one of the most common ways that people do muscle testing is they'll have the other person, the person that they're testing, hold out an arm parallel to the floor, and then they'll press down and they'll on the outstretched arm about as far out as they can go, and you can do this at home. You can have a person say their name. There's something true, like for example, if I were there with you and you were to say, "My name is Sandy," and if I were to press down on your arm and you try to resist me, you'd be strong. If you were to say something that's not true, like "My name is Jill," and you try to resist against my downward pressure, your arm would go down.
Yeah.
And so there's a change that takes place in the energy field of the body when you are stating something that's true or false, or positive or negative, or congruent or incongruent. And I'll tell you what. Let's do. Let's walk everyone through, your listeners, through the what we call the sway test,
Okay.
because you can do this pretty much anywhere. If you're driving, you might want to do this later, but you can do this standing. I think works best. You can also do it if you're sitting right on the edge of a chair and you're sitting upright. So think about this way. We know that plants will respond to positive or negative input. So, for example, if you put a plant near a window, if you don't rotate the pot, eventually the plant is going to be growing towards the light coming in from the window. Right?
Totally. Totally.
They've done studies. They know that, for example, if you put a drop of poison into some kind of a water source, a pond or an aquarium or something, the fish will sense that and they'll move away from it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have in this world, whether we're plants or animals or human beings, we have this innate ability to respond to positive or negative input. Now, the sway test is a way to actually get answers from your subconscious mind. It's very simple. Most people can do this the very first time they try it.
On
So here's how to do
themselves?
it.
On
What's that?
themselves? Would they do it on themselves? Like,
Yeah, you
can
do
you
this. Yeah, you can do this on yourself.
okay.
If you got permission from someone else, you can test them. We teach all of this, in the work that we do. But if you stand up and you drop your hands down to your sides and close your eyes and just take a breath and let that breath out and try to just totally relax. Now, what I'd like you to think about is I'd like you to think about the most negative thing on the planet going on, which is, I think, war. If you think about that word war for a moment, we hear that word every day. We've been hearing it all of our lives. But what I'd like you to do for a moment as you're standing there very relaxed is I'd like you to think about what's really going on in war. On a human level, what are people doing to other people when there's a war going on and feeling like they have no choice? They have to kill the enemy, or the enemy is going to kill them, and so on. What's really going on when there's a war that's happening? What's happening to families? What's happening to children, to wives, to husbands, to grandparents? What's happening to villages and cities? What is really the human cost of war? I'd like you to think for a moment about all the tears that have been shed on this planet since day one because of all the wars that have been fought. And as you think about that, as you think about what war really means on a human level, at a certain point, your subconscious mind is going to connect with what you are consciously thinking about. And in that moment, all of a sudden, you'll start to sway backward. Now, you don't want to force this. Just allow your subconscious mind to do whatever it wants to do. You just focus on standing up and not falling over, and you'll see that will happen. Now, that's your subconscious mind trying to move you away from the sheer negativity of that thought of war, right? Now, let's shift to something else. Let's imagine that, first of all, again, just relax, take a breath. We let that thought of war go on and recede. And now I'd like you to think about something else. I'd like you to imagine that 1,000 years have gone by and that we're living in the future now, and that you are a different person than you used to be. You're much more capable of something very important. And what you're capable of is really the most important thing I think that we can be capable of in this world, and that is unconditional love. I'd like you to imagine that not only are you feeling unconditional love from everything and every person, but that you are a vessel of unconditional love. Imagine that your ability to love others, to love all beings unconditionally, has grown so much that your heart cannot even contain that love. And that love expands out from your heart and it goes out into the world and it fills the world. Imagine what that would feel like to be a being of unconditional love. Now, when your subconscious mind connects with what you're consciously thinking, your subconscious mind will start to move you forward. You'll start to sway forward. And I know that a lot of your viewers and listeners are right on their tiptoes right now because that's what this does. And that's your subconscious mind telling you, yes, this is a potential future for us, for you, for me. This is something that we're actually capable of, right? We're capable of unlimited growth and unlimited progress. And this life is really just a stage on the journey. It's just a waypoint on our journey into infinity and into eternity. So anyway, if you felt your body going forward and back on those two, then you felt your subconscious mind expressing itself. And so what you can do is you can use this test to ask other questions. For example, you can pose this question to yourself. Do I have a trapped emotion that needs to be released? Do I have a trapped emotion that needs to be released? Think about that for a minute. And allow your subconscious mind to do whatever it wants to do. Is it going to go forward? Is it going to go backward? I don't know. Hold that thought. Do I have a trapped emotion that needs to be released? Now, here's another thought. We haven't really talked about this yet, but we've got about 15 minutes left. Let me explain something to you. First, we'll go ahead and have you try this. Ask yourself this question. Do I have a heart wall? Now, your subconscious knows what this is, right? Do I have a heart wall? And a heart wall is where we build up layers of emotional energy around our heart to protect our heart from being totally broken. Most people have this. So just ask that question. Do I have a heart wall? Focus on that. And allow your body to sway whichever way it wants to sway. And the heart wall is I think probably the most important thing you can do. Getting rid of it if you have one to help yourself. So what is a heart wall? Well, back in the 1960s, when they started doing heart transplants, people started coming back to the doctors saying that they had suddenly inherited with their heart some new things. They had now new tastes in food or music or sports. Sometimes their handwriting would completely change. Sometimes they would have memories of being in places that they never in their life had ever visited. And when these people were connected to the family or the relatives of the heart donor, they would find out, well, yes, our she was a concert violinist. And so that must be why you like classical music now and you never did before. And yes, that passage, that particular number was her favorite. So now that's why you can't get that out of your head. How bizarre. Or they'd say things like, well, yes, that's our son's handwriting that now you have. How weird is that? Or things like, our son loved baseball and went to every game, and now you love baseball and you go to every game too. That's so weird. Or, our daughter loved Starbucks and hazelnut lattes, and now that's why you can't seem to get enough of those, and you didn't care for them before. I mean, there's all these stories. There are books written about this. It's called cellular memory, right? It happens specifically with the heart. And so what we believe now is that the heart really is the core of our being. The ancient peoples believed that. They believed the heart was the seat of the soul, the source of love and creativity and romance. And that's why, if you're lucky, even today, after all these thousands of years, if it's Valentine's Day, maybe somebody will give you a heart-shaped box of something yummy, right?
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
Yeah.
And so that heart is still, to this day, is a symbol of love and romance. Well, we now know that if you feel like your heart is going to break, have you felt that sensation, Sandy? Where you
Yes.
felt like your heart was going to break at some
Yeah.
point?
100%. 100%.
And
Many
that's a
times.
physical sensation, right?
Many times.
Yeah. You can feel it. It's like sometimes like an elephant sitting on your chest, or like you can't breathe.
Yeah.
And so what'll happen is, if that experience happens to you more than once or twice, really, when that's happening, your heart is under assault, and that heart of yours is the core of your being. And so the subconscious mind, in an attempt to protect the heart, will put up a wall around that heart, and that wall is made of layers of your emotional baggage. And so when that emotional baggage is there and it's covering and wrapping around your heart, it makes it much more difficult for you to feel positive emotions, makes it easier to feel negative emotions. It will tend to result in things like depression and anxiety and social phobias and things. Sometimes hoarding can happen when you have a heart wall, because the hoard is like an extension of your heart wall. There's a lot of pain there, right? And so you build up this hoard as a way to help protect your heart, really. And we've seen people where the heart wall is removed and it's just made of trapped emotions. When that wall is removed, we've seen hoarders actually just clean up their own lives spontaneously and get rid of all their junk. Really interesting. But also people who, lots of people have fallen in love when that wall's taken down. Lots of people have gotten married, even found love even at advanced ages. People in their 80s.
Yeah.
We have stories about that. It's interesting because when that wall's taken down, people say that their creativity expands, and that they have creative ideas that start to flow to them spontaneously. You see, we really have two brains. We have a brain that's in our head, and that's just the hardware. It's the analytical part of us. But then we have this brain that's in our heart, and we know that that's true. You can ask any scientist who understands anatomy, and they will tell you, yes, we now know that there is something that we call the little brain in the heart, gray matter, white matter, and that brain in the heart contains the memories of the things you really love, your true affinities, the things you really care about. We're living now in the age of the heart. Think about it. If you're really hurt, where does your hand go? It goes to your heart. If you are feeling, because you're feeling it there, right? Imagine listening to or watching someone perform at almost a supernatural level of ability. Imagine listening to someone sing who is truly singing from the heart. If you look at the audience, my wife watches these videos where talented people go and they demonstrate, and a lot of them, for the first time in their lives. We've all seen those shows like America's Got Talent and so on,
Sure.
American Idol.
Yes. Yes.
If you look at the people in the audience, when there's someone that is really, it's unexpected and their talent is just so powerful, what are they doing? Well, they're in tears oftentimes, right? And if you
Yes.
look where their hands are over their hearts,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
see that. Why? Well, because the heart's the core of our being. And so we feel things with our heart. Now, one of the reasons why this planet has so much trouble is because 9 out of 10 people in this world have a wall around the heart. Now, we don't feel anything really with our physical brain up here in our heads. We feel things with our heart. And so when there's a wall around that heart, it's much more difficult to feel, much more difficult to find love and receive love and so on. And so it's really amazing and it's so fun. There's so many stories. I'll share one story with you. One of our practitioners told us this, that she went over to work on a woman at her home, and she did some emotion code with this woman. And she worked on this woman's son, too, who was 10 years old. and she released some trapped emotions from him. And all of a sudden, when she was done, he bolted out of the room. And they looked at each other and kind of wondered what was going on. And a minute or two later, he came back in and he was looking really puzzled. And his mom said, "Are you okay? What's going on?" And he said, "Well, I weighed myself this morning and I know exactly how much I weighed then." And he said, "I weighed myself just now and I can't figure it out because I know I feel 10 pounds lighter, but I weigh exactly the same."
Hmm.
Couldn't figure it out. That was really cute. People often do report feeling lighter.
Yeah.
And another quick story. One of our practitioners told us that her sister had been divorced for about 9 years, and she had not dated at all during that time. And she had not let her sister work on her either and release any of her emotional baggage. But finally, one day she called her up and she said, "Listen," she said, "I'm tired of being alone. It's been 9 years now, and I'm not getting any younger. And I just, I want love, and I have to do something." She said, "Well, you come over and work on me." So she did. They got together. They spent Saturday and Sunday together. They worked really on this woman's trapped emotions. And she had a heart wall that had been put up by her subconscious mind during the divorce she'd been through 9 years before. So they cleared all the trapped emotions, making up this heart wall. And neither one of them told anybody about this, that they had worked on each other. It was just kind of a thing between sisters. Well, on Monday, the phone started to ring. And who was calling? Well, guys that she had known that knew that she wasn't available. Now somehow they knew, or they thought maybe she was available. Why? Well, because you see, in quantum physics, we understand that we literally are all connected energetically.
Hmm.
And so when suddenly that wall was taken down and that heart of hers was suddenly open again to love, that energy, that knowledge went out into what Dr. Rupert Sheldrake calls the morphic field, or that field that fills the world and fills the universe. That knowledge went out, and so those guys that had known her but hadn't talked to her in a long, long time suddenly started thinking about her. See, and so then
Right.
they're calling her up, and that's how this works. It's really amazing.
Yes, it's
Isn't that
just
fun?
like, yeah, it is. It's like, when you start to think of somebody and then all of a sudden they call you and you haven't
Right.
talked to them, and it's like the same principle.
Yeah.
Um, okay, I can't let you go without talking about how. So everyone's listening and they're like, okay, you have to clear these out. Like, I know magnets are a big part of this work. How do you
Well,
use magnets in this?
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. When I was first figuring all of this out, I was using magnets to do this, to release these trapped emotions, and
Yeah.
we still use magnets.
Okay.
But when I was writing the emotion code book, um, I I suddenly realized, as I was writing the part about magnets in the book and explaining about how we use magnets, I suddenly realized, uh, I people are going to buy this book for $20 or something, and then I'm going to tell them that they've got to go spend $90 on a magnet. Uh, and at that point, I realized, I've never really tried other magnets, and so that at that point, I started testing all kinds of magnets.
Okay.
Strong magnets, weak magnets, positive polarity, negative polarity, really expensive magnets, really cheap magnets. And what I found was they're all the same. They all work the same. You do not have to spend any money on a magnet. If you got a magnet on your fridge from your plumber, that'll work just fine. And you got a Hello Kitty magnet in your drawer somewhere, that works just great.
Okay.
There's no difference with magnets. In fact, we finally realized that you don't even need to use a magnet, because your hand is also putting out this biomagnetic energy all the time. And so you can use your hand to release a trapped emotion. Now, how we release trapped emotions is we pass a magnet or your hand over what we call the governing meridian. It starts at the tailbone, goes straight up the back, over the top of the head to the inside of the upper lip. And when at the point that you've gone through this what we call the process, the emotion code process,
Yeah.
and an emotional energy is ready to be released, then you can just swipe your hand or a magnet I usually go from my forehead over the top of my head to the back of my neck, 3 times, 10 times if the emotional energy was inherited. In other words, you got it conception from mom and
Yeah,
dad. And
I read
it's,
about that. Very
yeah, those
cool.
can go back for quite a ways.
Yeah.
That's a whole
Very.
nother topic though.
I think so too. I don't know if you've read the book. It Didn't Start With You, Mark Woolen.
No,
He
but I've heard of it. It's on my list.
Yeah, I actually interviewed him, and we talk a lot about that and how, this stuff is actually in our bodies. Like we share the cells. And if you've read Dr. Bruce Lipton, The Biology of Belief, and, like this stuff is not woo woo. This
No.
is, this has actually been proven in some studies that we carry these cells within our bodies that share trauma.
Yep, absolutely. The beautiful thing about the emotion code is that with it, you can locate, you can find and remove those energies, even if they have been handed down for you from hundreds of years ago. You can find those and remove those. And that's one of the most powerful things, one of the most fun things also about this work is that when you find and remove those inherited energies, there's very good evidence that you're not only removing them from you or the person that you're working on, but also from the person that they got that from, their mom or their dad. And even we believe, even from ancestors that predate them, maybe going back 10 or 20 generations. And that might sound really strange, but we'll have to do another show and then I can
Yeah.
explain how all that
You know,
works.
this is such a beautiful topic for me. And you know what? I was saying to you briefly, I'm going to try this because, of course, I've read both your books and I highly recommend it because, people are always asking me, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do to feel better? And I'm always saying, well, it starts within, right? Because I can recommend the best therapeutic grade supplements and the best diet and nutrition, but it kind of starts inside of you, right? And so this is
Yeah.
a great way in which you can kind of take that within your own hands, like take those matters within your own hand. And then you've got practitioners everywhere if you need the help, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yep.
So, and okay, is there anything that we didn't cover off that you wanted to cover off?
No, I don't think so. But if this is the first time you've heard about this, just open your mind to the possibility that that we have not necessarily been aware of all the
Mm.
truth that is available to us, and that we're finally waking up and we're realizing that we are beings of pure energy. That is true. We've known that since Einstein, but we're finally actually starting to incorporate some of these ideas into healing and into our lives, and be open to the idea and the possibility that emotional baggage is part of your life, that it's affecting your life, that it is a part of your physical or mental or emotional symptoms. And you can start to work on yourself if you want to. If you want to find a practitioner that can work with you, we have many of them listed on our website at discoverhealing.com. And we have people all over the world. And so it's something that you can do yourself by reading the book, or you can have someone else work with you. There are people probably in your local area. And so it's all good. Just open your mind to the possibility that what I'm telling you is actually true, because it actually is. And so thank you, Sandy, for giving me a chance to be on your show and connect with your audience. It's been
Thank
really
you.
fun.
It has been fun. I love it. Okay, so are you on Instagram? Are you active on Facebook? Like we have discoverhealing.com, your book, The Body Code.